Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Patterson. I'm the Community Digitization Coordinator here at the Washington State Library, and I am helping to run the Washington Digital Heritage Grants this year.
And my name is Maura Walsh, and I'm the LSTA Grants and Contracts Coordinator. So we set up the process of applying and receiving grants. So just a short history and explanation of what a Washington Digital Heritage Grant is. This is actually one of our oldest programs that is ongoing here. It started in 2008, and then it was known as Washington Rural Heritage, and it was slightly different at that time, primarily because it went to small communities. But then in 2018, we expanded the parameters on that, and we also changed the name to make it Washington Digital Heritage. So you no longer had to be in a small community to be eligible for the grant. Then in 2019, we expanded a little bit more because we included special libraries and more partnerships and encourage more partnerships, which we continue to do right now. So some details to keep in mind that are making our life easier, and we hope yours as well. First, we have DocuSign, which is an electronic way to sign a contract. So this speeds up the process quite a bit. We also have started using a LibGuide or an online guide, which you hopefully have seen already, but we'll post a link to that later on. Another novelty that we started last year was submitting a letter of interest. So if you have an idea, but you're not sure it'll work, or you're not sure how to phrase things exactly so that the reviewers will understand it well, you can give us a letter of interest, which is very short and sweet. It's an online form as well. And we'll give you guidance and suggestions before you submit the real application. This year, awards can be up to $15,000. Full-time staff are not eligible for salary reimbursement, and federal work-study paid staff are not eligible for reimbursement. That's because if they're already being paid with federal money, we can't replace federal money with federal money. It's a rule. And then we need your contracting authority's confirmation of the full application before we give it to the reviewers. But we don't actually have a physical signature sheet, which we had in the past. So once we have your application and the accompanying documents that you've attached, we'll make copies of all of that and send it to your contracting authority. And once they email us back saying yes, that they approve of everything, that's when we can pass it on to the reviewers. So it's important to have all of that in place.
All right. So the overarching objectives of the Washington Digital Heritage Grants are to connect Washingtonians to their history, employing digital initiatives and other preservation strategies to tell the stories of local communities and to celebrate our common heritage. So this can be done through a number of means. Obviously, digitization is the most common, but there are really a number of ways that this can be done. The award should support digital initiatives focused on archival and special collections of cultural or historical significance. This is either for your local community, Washington as a whole. They're for public, tribal, special, and academic libraries. So if you've got a library and it's open to the public, then you are most likely eligible. We are not open. The grants themselves are not open to museums and other cultural heritage institutions. However, we strongly encourage libraries to work with other community organizations. So if you're a museum or other heritage organization and you have for a project that you think would fit within the objectives, but you don't have your own library, we encourage you to speak with your local library or another library that you would be able to partner with. And then they can apply for the grant and work with you to complete the project. And the same if you're a library and you know of another local organization that you believe would be a good partner, we encourage you to reach out to them. So project outputs should be openly accessible to the public. And this just means that, we want to be able to see this shared throughout the state, not just for an individual library. And the most common way of doing this is just posting online, whatever digitized materials or outputs you create. But there are other ways of sharing as well through social media, through events, things like that. And as I mentioned, we encourage, but don't require working with partners. So what can you do with the Washington Digital Heritage Grant? There are a wide variety of things that you can do with these grants, as long as it's focused on sharing our Washington's cultural heritage through digital means. The most common is digitization or reformatting of archival and special collections. So this would be scanning photos, diaries, documents, that sort of thing. It was the main focus of this grant when it started, and it's still one of the most popular. The materials can be from your own holdings or from the holdings of a partner institution, or even from members of the public. And you can organize this by reaching out to specific individuals or families that hold collections that are significant to your town or region or the state as a whole, or even broaden it further and get materials from members of the public through things like digitization days, obviously COVID restrictions allowing. There are examples of these sorts of materials on Washington Rural Heritage, which is the website that these grants were originally feeding into when they were the Washington Rural Heritage grants. And there are numerous collections available there. If you're looking more, for example, of a library that decided to digitize materials and then post them on their own platform, the University of Puget Sound libraries posted the Abby Williams Hill diaries on their own platform, and that's through a Washington Digital Heritage grant, and that's an example of that. All right, so the next is metadata creation, remediation, cleanup, and/or recataloging. And this is often something that goes hand in hand with the digitization project. So if you're digitizing materials, you will likely also be doing some metadata work. But the grants can be used also specifically for metadata work, such as cleaning up metadata to make already digitized materials more openly accessible or better searchable. Any metadata creation or cleanup should be for digital materials. So this isn't a project for just creating catalog records for your library holdings, but it can be used for creating catalog records for materials that will then be digitized. And while looking for examples of this, a good place to see would have been the Western Washington University Library's Beery Galen photo collection, which we gave them a grant to clean up metadata as they were moving from Content DM to Islandora. So the next would be creation of board digital multimedia content, oral histories, digital exhibits, stuff like that. And these, I think I'd say the oral histories have been our most popular. A good example of that would be the Ocean Shores 50th anniversary oral history series. And these can be used to go out, interview people or create digital exhibits, really anything creating new material that is focused on preserving and sharing Washington history. So the next is development of local standards, practices, and policies related to digitization, metadata creation, and digital preservation. And this is another thing that often goes hand in hand with a basic digitization project. So if you're scanning photos or something like that, you need to have processes in place for the steps you will take to scan those photos. So often awardees will create policies, or they may use ones pre-created by someone else. But if you are creating your own local standards, that can be part of this project. And the project itself can also be focused more directly on creating those standards. So for instance, if you start looking and notice that there aren't really a good set of best practices or standards for the sort of project that you want to do, you could create those standards yourself and then share them with others so that nobody else has to go through the same process that you did to create them. And so the Everett Community College is a good example of this. When they were doing a digitization project to scan some yearbooks, they also created a set of best practices to go along with that and then shared them with other community colleges. And then the last here is integration of primary sources and archival collections into educational settings by way of lesson plans, curricula, or open educational resources. And we haven't actually had anyone do this yet with the grant, but there are examples out there of people creating materials like this. Some are available on DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America, and we'd love to see more of this in the future. So while that is a fairly big list of things that you can do with a Washington Digital Heritage Grant, it's not a comprehensive list. We purposely leave the list kind of broad and open to allow potential awardees to come up with other projects and propose other projects. Overall, the project needs to be digital. It needs to be focused on Washington history and heritage. And in addition to that, it should meet two other goals. First, to develop institutional capacity to carry out and sustain digital initiatives. So that means that an organization or a library that receives this grant, after they've completed it, should be able to do similar projects in the future. And the second is to support regional or statewide approaches to digitization and the use of digital cultural heritage collections. And so that just means that we want to see this open to the public. We want the outcomes of this grant to be shared as widely as possible and to reach as many people as possible. All right. So these grants use LSTA funding and therefore are subject to some specific requirements. But overall, here's a list of some of the things that you can do with these grants. So the first is to purchase equipment or software to create, edit, optimize, or preserve digital content during the grant period. So by equipment, that could be scanners, it could be camera setups, it could be digital recording devices to create oral histories. It could be computers or laptops to process the materials. And software, that could be anything that you need to then further process the materials and get them up on your desired platform. For software, we should note that that is only during the grant period. So any subscription software may need to be prorated if the subscription extends beyond the grant period. The next is to pay salaries and benefits for qualifying project staff or contract services, including independent contractors and third-party vendors for the project activities. So as Mara mentioned, this grant can't be used for work study staff or for staff who are already working 40 hours a week. This has to be for staff that were either newly hired or were not already working for the library full-time. So if you've got a part-time staff who is working 30 hours a week, then they would be eligible to work on this grant for up to 10 hours a week and have their time reimbursed. We can use the grant funds to pay for staff training related to the project. The Washington State Library staff can also offer some training, and we do that for free for areas in which we are qualified to provide that. And we also do provide opportunities for training through our professional development grants for training that wouldn't fall under this grant. But if your staff needs training to help carry out a specific part of the project, that would fall within this grant. And then the last is to pay for costs related to outreach and promotion of the project. So things like printing or advertising, event costs, and permanent or temporary displays. So this is just something that, once again, you can use the funds, but they have to be specifically related to the grant. So you can't have a bunch of bookmarks printed up that say, our library is great. Even if your library is great, I'm not contradicting that, but you can print up bookmarks saying, you know, hey, our library just digitized all these materials. This whole collection is now online. And you can include your library's, you know, name on those bookmarks if you do, but the main point of those bookmarks would need to be, you know, this is the new digital collection online. And now I will hand this over to Mara.
Thank you. So now I have to tell you the things that are not allowable. We don't digitize newspapers, except in some cases a student publication or an organizational newsletter. We have another program at Washington State Library that is dedicated to regular newspaper digitization. Purchasing computers, servers, or any equipment which provides internet access, unless the library has a current SIPA agreement. So SIPA is the Child Internet Protection Act, and it is a way of filtering and making internet more safe for children to use. So when we use LSTA money, which is used in this grant, we can never purchase any equipment that accesses the internet unless it has this. Most public libraries do have this now. Very few do not. Subscription systems or services that are outside of the contract period. So if you buy a year-long subscription in June, but your contract ends in April, that means we could only pay it through April. And we will prorate this. We prorate to the day. So we will give you the maximum amount that we can. Archival and special collections materials. This is if they are things that are not regular parts of your collection. So for example, things that belong to an archive that is not part of the regular heritage cultural part of your collection that you're dealing with. Food and refreshments. Oh, I'm sorry. The materials is what I mean. So for example, you can't buy archival boxes or acid-free paper to put into to keep your materials after you've digitized them. Okay, so all of those special type materials are not considered part of this digital project. Food and refreshments, general library promotion, prizes, or any other type of incentive are also not allowed. And again, those are LSTA rules, not Washington State Library rules. And the reimbursement of work for regularly scheduled full-time staff. This is something, again, that we're not allowed to replace local funding with these federal funds. So if it's something that was already being bought by your library, bought and paid for, like your staff, we can't replace those funds with federal funding. So that's the reason why we can't do those. All right, next slide. So here we have the different parts of the application. So number one is the actual application itself online that contains some explanation, but really our online guide has more complete explanation. But in this, you will put all of the facts and figures that we need about your library in general. But then we also have two other documents that you will need to download, fill out, and attach to number one application. So number two is the work plan, which is sort of a step-by-step what you plan to be doing and the dates that you plan to do it and who's going to be responsible. So this is very helpful to our reviewers to make sure that what you have in mind seems logical and doable. And document number three is your budget proposal. And in here we want line item by line item, what you will be spending the money on and some details about it. It doesn't have to be exact, but ballpark. And that also will show us what your total is, and we'll be able to see if you can actually achieve what you think you can with the amount of funding that you've asked for, and that everything that you want to do is allowable. And then number four is the risk assessment. This is not specific to this project, but it is a way for us to see what kind of auditing we need to do along the way, what kind of help and support your library might need. So this is a way that we can make a better decision about how we can help you. The risk assessment is not something that would generally disqualify your library. So don't worry about that. It's more just part of good project management for us. And as we mentioned earlier, we do have a letter of interest. This is optional, but if you'd like to fill it out and maybe get some pointers on what could make your application stronger, or what things maybe you haven't thought of yet, we'd be happy to do that. And just that's another online one. We'll give you the link in a second. So that will help us help you. All right, next slide. So here are the links that we talked about. First is the online application, which everyone needs to fill out. Then the letter of interest, which is optional. So if you'd like to do it, you can. The LibGuide, this is our online guide that will explain all of the details. And then in case you can't find something in our LibGuide and you want to know something about it, or you want to know more, our contact email is wslgrants@sos.wa.gov. And since we are working remotely part of the time, it would be very convenient if you send a phone number and a good time to call you. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with you either online or by phone. Okay, now this is our part for questions. Caitlin, do you have any questions?
I don't think so, but if I do, I'll check the LibGuide first.
Okay. Or just email us, and if it's in the LibGuide, we'll email you back and say, check the LibGuide. Anyway, we're hoping to see tons of applications. We'd love to encourage everyone to apply.
And thank you for watching our webinar today.
Yes, thank you very much.